QuickBooks Enterprise 2021. Two businesses and personal bookkeeping in one QuickBooks file using classes, account numbers, and setting a default class. Get ready. It's time to boldly account where no accountant has accounted before with QuickBooks Enterprise 2021. Here we are in our practice file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown, selecting the open windows list. In a prior presentation, we set up our company file. We set up the classes, turning on the classes, entering a few classes within it. The classes can be found at the edit dropdown, down to the preferences, and then we went to the accounting up top. We went into the company preferences tab to the right. Down below, we have our classes. We turned on the classes. Now we're going to focus in on assigning the class in a particular way. We have three options. This option is only available to you in the Enterprise version, so you don't have it in Pro. You can still use the classes. This is not a required option, but we're going to think about how to set the default settings as we go. So we got three options we have here. We could set by name, items, and accounts. We're going to be setting by accounts, but just let's test out the other items. If we set by name, that means that we're going to be setting like the default class that will be recorded when recording transactions for names. So the names will be driving the default transaction. So that would be vendors' names when we pay a bill or a check. The vendor that we choose will drive it. And then customers, if we're talking about sales items, then the customer we pick will then drive what class it will be going into. And then if we had employees, the particular employee, if we had different classes, would be driving what class it would be going to in that case. So let's take a look at that. If I choose the names here and then say okay, and let's just set up a name, then let's go to the vendors company drop down, vendor center, and the vendor center. And let's say we add a vendor up top and say I want a new vendor, and I'm just going to call this vendor 1. Vendor 1. And then we set up the additional information down below. Now we've got this field here for the classes. So I can go ahead and assign one of the classes. Let's say this was like B1, business 1. If I say okay, and then there we have that set up. Now, if I switch it now, that would be similar for if we had a customer, would be a similar kind of setup, or an employee. If I go back to the home page then, and I was to say enter a bill for a particular vendor, which will be that vendor 1, I'm going to say, okay, vendor 1. It'll then pick up that transaction down below in the class, assigning the class for that particular vendor. So that's one way we could set up the default classes, which can make the data input easier. Let's try another option. If I go to the file drop-down, or the edit drop-down, I should say, because that would be the correct thing to say, and I want to say the correct thing would be preferences down at the bottom, accounting up top, company preferences. Let's change it to items now. So I'm going to switch it on over to items and then say okay. So now if I go back into the center for the vendor center, this is in the open windows here, and I double click on the vendor center person, and I go to the additional information, it's now gone. That item that we had is now gone because the default's not being driven by the people or the vendors, or the names, vendors, customers, employees, but rather by the items. Primary items are the service items and the inventory items. So the items drop down list would be here. If I then go to the items list, let's set up a new item just to practice. I'm just going to say items rise up, new item. And I'm just going to call it a service item. Let's say this is item 1, service item. Then we have our class field here once again. And I could choose, let's say B2 this time. And then we'll say this is going to go to the revenue account of sales. And let's keep it at that. I'm going to say save it, close it. So there we have it. And then if I go to the home page and I was to create an invoice, for example, this time, pulling up the invoice, it's not going to be driven by the customer here. I could say customer 1 and set up a customer, quickly adding it, quick add. It's not setting up a class there for us because that's not what's driving it. But then if I go into the item 1, then that's what drives the class setting. So the class is being driven now by the item. Closing that back out, I'm going to say don't record that. We can then try another one, report the edit drop down, the preferences, accounting up top, company preferences. Now we got the classes not by item, but by account. So now we want to take a look at the accounts. Going to close this back out. This will be like the chart of accounts. So if we then take a look at that, if I go back to my items list now, and I was to check out that item, double clicking on that item, do I still have that option? No, it's gone. We have no class option here to set the default class on the item because the default classes will now be driven by the accounts. Closing out the item list, then we can go to our accounts, go into the lists drop down chart of the accounts. So when we set up a new account now, we should be able to assign the class at that point. Let's just look at one that's been set up. Right clicking, I'm going to pick up this bank service charge and edit that account. Editing the account, we see our class field over here. So now we can add the class. So this is the next way that we can do this. Obviously, if I set this to like B1 and save it and close it, and then I go back to the home page and we entered a bill, let's say, for then I drive it by the class. That was the bank service charge. The class has been assigned automatically. So those are the three options to have the default setting for classes only available on the enterprise side. Otherwise, you just manually input the class. So if you're in Pro or something and you don't have that option, then you could simply manually input the class. But it's nice to have those options. You got to pick one of the three though. So I'm going to right click on this one. I'm going to edit. And I'm gonna remove this for now. So can I just delete this? Will that mess anything up? I'm gonna save it and close it. So save anyway. All right. So we're gonna move forward with it being assigned by classes here. Now, if we're thinking about different company sections here, if we have different locations for our company or business and personal breakout that we have, whether those companies are just different locations of the same company or actually different companies, like we have two different medical offices for a husband and wife that are actually different businesses or something like that, then we can use the classes to assign them out. We can kind of double check this by basically finding a way to have all the accounts be separated between the two, as well as assigning the proper class. That way it'll be broken out both by column and kind of by row. So we'll have a separate account and we'll have it broken out by column in a separate class. So that's the two options that you could have. In other words, say you had this one expense here and you wanted to break that out between two businesses, you can then have one expense account that you will then be having different classes for, breaking out between the two businesses. That's one option you can have. That'll save a little space because it'll only have one line item with two columns on it. Or you can make two accounts, one for one business, one for another business, and that way it'll have two separate accounts lined up, and so you can kind of line it up in two separate accounts, and you can have basically two columns, which will give you a little bit of a double check. And if you do it that way, then you can basically assign your accounts to be going directly to one business or the other, meaning I'll have a completely different account whenever possible for one business or the other, so that I can have a double check that I'm going to that account and then set the default class for that particular account. So one way we might think about doing that is, well, how can we differentiate maybe one account versus another if both of them have a similar account, like the supplies or something is the same for both, but I want to break them out. One way we could do that is with account numbers. So we might add account numbers here and say, hey, look, this series of account numbers in this section is going to apply to this business. This series of account numbers is going to apply to another section. And that way we can have a breakout both in terms of like a vertical type of a breakout and a horizontal type of a breakout. So let's see what that will look like. If we go then and turn the account numbers on, we can go to the Edit dropdown, Preferences, and then I'm going to go to the Accounting up top, and we're going to go to the Company Preferences. Then I'm going to turn on the account numbers. So I'm going to say use the account numbers, and then QuickBooks will assign default account numbers. I'm going to say save it and close it. And so there we have it. Now, you're not required to use account numbers. You can do this without account numbers if it's a little bit more confusing, but this is another way that you can kind of separate what you're doing. Now, notice the checking account we put up here doesn't have an account number because we added it afterwards and didn't assign an account number to it. So we'd have to go in there and assign an account number to it. And then what we can do is go through here and differentiate the accounts that are going to be for one business versus the other business. or personal from business, and we could do so with the account numbers, having one series of numbers that we know are going to be for one business, one series of numbers basically for the second business within each category section. What that'll do is it'll have a vertical breakout too. So in other words, if we have two numbers for like the rent down here for two separate line items, we're not going to have that side-by-side comparison because the two rent numbers will not line up right next to each other for the two different locations. However, it'll give us a vertical kind of breakout so that we can better distinguish. It'll be easier for us to distinguish one company, versus the other company because we'll have a vertical breakout. So let's think about that, what that would look like. So for example, for accounts receivable up here, we have the series of 11,000. So if we say that, well, that's going to be for business 1, business 2, we might set up an account number that starts with the 200 series. So 11,200 or something like that. And I just know that separate account number will be the accounts receivable for the second company. We could do the same for any of the fixed assets, and the expenses is where this kind of is most distinct. Notice here that we have all of the expenses in the 600 series. Now, if we were to say, hey, look, I'm just going to say all the 600s are for B1, first business, and I'm going to make all the 700s are going to be for B2, then I'll have that vertical kind of breakout when I start to enter these accounts. Anything with a 600, I know it's going to go to B1. Anything with a 700 to B2. It'll have a vertical breakout as well as a breakout in terms of a horizontal and vertical breakout by column and by row in that case. So let's do a couple of these on the expenses, which are most distinct. So what I'm going to do is just set up new accounts here and then just mirror the number, but mirror the number in the 700 series. So I'm going to start with the advertising here, and we're going to mirror the 6,000, but then I'm going to have it a 7,000 for for B2. So 6,000s or 60,000s will be for B1, 70,000s will be for B2. So I'm going to say account rise up, new account, and I'm just going to say this is going to be an expense, and we'll continue with it. And I'm going to say this is going to be for the account number of 70000, and this is going to be advertising and promotion. And then you could put an indication here in the name too if you so choose, but the account number could drive it. And if you don't want to use account numbers to do this, then you could indicate it basically in the name. I mean, you could even, if you want it in alphabetical order, you can put an A or a B before one or the other. So it'll then be in alphabetical order in the expenses. So that's another way that you can indicate it without the use of the account numbers to do a similar kind of breakout. So I'm going to say save it and close it, and I'll save anyways. Hold on. They say the name already exists, so they won't let me do the same name. I'll put a period after it. Save it and close it. And so there we have the 70,000 down below. So I'm just going to do the same process all the way down with different account numbers. So I'm going to say, all right, maybe not all the way down, but I'm going to say new. And this is going to be an expense. I'm going to continue. And this is going to be for, I'm going to say 70200. And this is going to be automobile expense, period. And then I'm going to say save it and new it. Save anyway. And then we'll do another one. And this is going to be for the account number 70400. This is going to be for bank service charges. And I'll put a period after it, period. And then save it and new it. And I should be putting the class in there as well. Hold on a sec. Let me put the class in there. This is going to be for B2. So then I'm going to say save and new. And we're going to have to go back in, and I'll have to put the classes in the rest of them as well. So I'm going to say this is going to be computer and internet. So this is going to be 71700. This is going to be computer and internet expenses. And then I'm going to set the class for B2 and then save it and new it. And I'm going to say OK. And I need a period, save it and new it. And then we've got the next one is going to be depreciation. So I'm going to say this is 72400. This is going to be depreciation expense. And then this is going to be B2. B2, I'm going to put a period after the depreciation expense. And then save it and new it. And then we have, I'm going to say depreciation. This is going to be 72500. This is going to be dues and subscriptions. And this is going to be B2. And then I'll say save it and new. And then we'll do the 7330. And this is going to be insurance expense, period. And this is going to be B2. Okay, so I'm going to save and close it there. And you can see the trend as we go down here. Now we could add these basically as we go, as we start to enter data into the system to break this out. And what will be nice when we do it this way is if something is uncategorized, if we didn't assign a class, then it'll be ranked in uncategorized, and then the account numbers here will help us then to do the categorization. We can then check out these account numbers, which will help us to assign it to the proper category. Now we also are going to have personal expenses in here as well. So we're going to do the personal expenses, and those we might set up with with the 8s, right? The 8s down here for an expenses, and I'm going to add another 0 to this one. I'm going to edit this one and add another 0. So I'm going to say 0, 0. So that lines out. Okay, so then personal expenses, we're going to say starts with an 8. So we might have things on personal expenses like groceries, or we might have restaurants that we're going to be breaking out. We might break out the restaurants to multiple different restaurants to see where we're going from time to time. So I'm going to say those start with the 8s. So I'm going to say, let's go new, edit new account. And I'm going to say, not edit. I'm not editing. I'm going to add account rise up, new. And then this is going to be an expense type of account. And I'm going to continue. And I'm going to say that this is going to be, and we might have some kind of standard ones like utilities and whatnot that would still be in place. So the utilities were in prior accounts. The utilities in the 600 series was 68600. So 68600, so I'll say 88600 for the utilities. But this one is going to be for personal, and I'm going to call it utilities and dot. And then this is going to be for personal. And I'm going to say, and you could put in the name utilities personal or utilities P or P utilities. Again, if you want to try to break this out without account numbers, then you could put a ABC in front of each of the names, and that'll break it out. But if I say save it and close it, that now you've got the utilities down here in the 8 series. So we'll have it down there, and we can break this out then vertically. So I can say add another account, new account. Some other accounts we might have on the personal side. We might have bank service depreciation. Insurance is something we might have on the personal side as well. So I might say expense, add, and then insurance. And so the insurance on the business side is at the 63300. So I'm going to say 83300. And then I'll say insurance ... And then this is going to be for personal. And I'll say save it and new. So I'll say save and new. And then we might have some expenses, of course, that aren't on the business side of things for the personal. So we might have expenses that don't fit into the business side of things. So let's say like 87500. And let's say we put in like a restaurant. So you might say that would be like meals and entertainment, and that might be the case. But on the personal side, we might want to break it out as basically restaurants, and we might want to break it out between like sit-down restaurants and other restaurants. We might want to break it out by actual restaurants that we go to because we want to see how much we're spending at each location basically on that level. We can do that again with other reports by looking at vendor reports, but we might want to break it out on a more detailed level. And so we might say save and new, and we might have a let's cancel that. Hold on a second. Class, let's add personal. And then we might say save and new, and we might say that we want like groceries. So let's say we said 87520 and say we had groceries. And again, we might want to break out groceries as a parent account and then have basically the stores that we're going to buying our groceries at as sub-accounts to give us some detail of where we're going. We can do that in the vendor lists as well, but we might want to break that out in some more detail on the income statement. So let's assign that. I'm going to assign that to personal, and then I'm going to say save it and close it. So now on the expenses side of things, which again is the longest amount of accounts typically, we've got this breakout for the numbers, the 6 series, the 7 series, and the 8 series. And you can imagine that our income statement could be quite long this way, but notice we'll have that nice kind of breakout on a tiered kind of fashion between the expenses. And then if anything is uncategorized, improperly categorized, it should line up both by the expense that's categorized, the proper account number, and the proper column. So that'll give us kind of a double check that we can then go back in there and make sure it's assigned to the proper place. It also allows us to go into these expenses then and assign each account to a particular class and use that automatic classing so that when we enter the data, we can have some surety of, okay, which account is going where, and then tie out the classes to it and then assign the classes as we go. Now to set these up then, of course, we'd have to go into each of these accounts, edit these accounts, and add the class to it. So I got to add all the ones in the 6 series should be going to B1. So I'm going to set all these out to B1. So I'm going to set all these classes, edit these to B1 in the 6 series. So I'm just going to right click on all these, edit the account, set it to B1, set it to B1, right click, edit, set it to B1, and right click, edit, set it to B1, and right click, edit. We're going to set it to B1, and then right click, edit, and then we're going to set it to B1, save and close, right click, edit, and then we're going to set it to B1, save it and close it, right click, edit, and then we're going to set it to B1, save it and close it, save and close, right click, edit, and then we're going to set it to B1, save it and close it, right click, edit, and then we're going to set it to B1, save it and close it, right click, edit, and then we're going to set it to B1, save it and close it. We're almost there. This is kind of fun though. I'm getting into a little rhythm here. We're going to set it to B1, and then we got the next one, right click, edit, and then we're going to set it to B1, like 3 more here, 4, 5 more. There's still a lot. This is taking forever, but that's okay. It's not that bad. We're going to edit it. I will provide a backup file here if you don't want to do this tedious job, but you know, it's kind of fun. And a couple more here, and we have to do a couple of them on the 7,000 series because I didn't add a class. So this 7,000 now, these are going to B2. So right click, edit, then we're going to set it to B2 and then save it and close it. And this one I'm going to right click, edit, and then we're going to set it to B2, save it and close it. Then we're going to right click, edit, and set this one to B2, and those are all set. So there we have that. Now you might not want to do a whole like 6s, 7s, and 8s. You might want to set it, somewhere all within 6s and 7s or something like that, but you should have plenty of room. Other income and expenses down here, we still have the 9,000 series at the bottom to pick up other income and expenses, the other 2 line items down below. There's usually not too much involved there. So that's going to be the basic idea. And again, when you look at the income statement, we're imagining then the breakout of the expenses on a tiered fashion. So B1 expenses, and then the B2 expenses will be below that, B3 expenses below that, and broken out now vertically as we have assigned the classes, B1 column, B2 column, then the personal column, or may not be in that order, but that's the idea. And then if anything is out of order, we can easily see it, and we can assign the classes out to then do this automatically.